Hello, everyone. It's David Sanya from the David Sanya podcast, and today's guest we have Jeff Ponchik. Jeff was the co-founder of Repost Network, a platform that transformed how independent artists distribute and collect royalties from their music. Repost Network was later acquired by Soundcloud, where Jeff served as a vice president, leading major initiatives to empower creators. He's been recognized as a Billboard Indie Power Player and included in Forbes 30 Under 30 for his contributions to the music industry. Now, he's launched a new venture, Mogul, focused on giving artists more control over their royalties and business data. Jeff's experience spans everything from music distribution to tech innovation to creative artistry, and I'm excited to dive into his journey today. With all of that said, how are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing wonderful. As we were saying before we jumped on this call, we've known each other for a long time. And yeah, it's great to finally hear your voice, and I'm excited to be here today and chop it up.
100%. I'm feeling the same. All right, let's get into it. So, Jeff, aside from being an entrepreneur, a mogul, if you will, you're also a creative. From making your own music to having had dreams of becoming a comic book artist, as well as virtually every job you've had before Repost has been in the creative space. Taking everything into account, it begs the question, what does art mean to you? Why has it been so ever present in your life?
Wow. It's a great question. What does art mean to me? It means a lot of things. I think that, at least for me, when you're making art, the whole world kind of slips away. All the problems and responsibilities and things you need to do. There's kind of nothing in my life that's really asked like such a incredible amount of focus, and the payoff for art is just remarkable when you have something that you're proud of and happy to share with others. So I think from a very, very early age, and I don't know how you found out about the comic book thing. That's like kind of crazy, because that was like what I wanted to do when I was like 10 years old or something. But so good job on the research. But yeah, I mean, I think ever since a really young age, I just loved getting into that zone and that headspace. And I love kind of going through that tunnel and coming out the other side and hopefully having something that you're excited to share. And then, that's always fun too, right? To see how you express yourself and how other people respond to it. So for me, art on a personal level has just been almost sort of a therapeutic practice. And I got addicted to it. And what I found was, when I started to get into music, I found that I was always better at managing the band than being sort of in the band. And so eventually I did that cue and transitioned more onto the business side of things. But yeah, I'm very lucky to be able to work with artists, make some art myself, more just for myself, but and to be around.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So my next question, you may not have gone the comic artist route, but in a twist of fate, you got to work with the icon Stan Lee by distributing his Stan tones. What was it like for you meeting him in person?
Yeah, that was incredible. That was, he signed a comic for me. I was probably, I feel like I've been fortunate to meet a lot of like large musicians and industry titans and moguls, as you were. I don't think I was more nervous or like kind of shaky.
It's Stan Lee.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I grew up just, reading Spider-Man comics and I'm still kind of a comic book nerd at heart. So that was just really, really, really cool. And big shout out to my friend Eric Gladstone, who used to work with him and facilitated the introduction and the partnership. That was one of those things where I just took a step back and I'm like, I can't not only meeting an idol, but actually like contributing and working with him.
Yeah.
Contributing. That was really fun. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go to the next question. Again, great answer too. You've had a variety of jobs before launching Repost Network, such as music director, editor, post-production supervisor, and network manager. What was it like for you transitioning into the different structure that is business? And did any of that prior experience prove valuable with Repost?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the best way for me to answer that question is to kind of tell the story of what happened and what I learned. But yeah, so I mean, if you go way, way, way back, I went to film school. And still am I love movies and cinema, and I love that world. But yeah, I went to film school. UC Santa Cruz, made a lot of really cool, psychedelic student films, and then got out after college into, the film industry. And what I learned really, really quickly was that I didn't like being on set. I found that very few people on set during production are actually, and this is just my opinion, very few people are actually creative, right? Excluding maybe the cinematographer, the director, maybe, the production designer. But so I found myself for about a year kind of doing a lot of just almost like construction-y type work on these sets. And it just wasn't really for me. And so I said, oh, well, editing might be a good path, right? Because that's where the movie or the TV show comes together. If you're actually become an editor, that's like a creative practice. And so I made the position, I transitioned into editing. I found out I was quite good at it. And I worked my way up as an assistant editor to an actual editor. What not a lot of people know is I've actually edited on a couple of reality TV shows back in the day. I actually got to that level, which was really fun. But, I think going through that process for a few years, what I learned was, there were elements of that I didn't like either, which was, you sit in a room with no windows for, hours a day, editing it starts to kind of eat away at you a little bit. And, but I enjoyed it. And, the transition to digital and music was, I was working an editing gig and there was a multi-camera shoot or angle. So there's a multi-camera shoot means there were multiple cameras shooting the same thing. And there's this really tedious process when you're editing where you have to like line up all the audio and all the video together in sync so you can cut between them. That's sort of a tedious process, right? It's actually like why at the beginning when they have the clapper.
Yeah.
Sync the video and the sound, right? So anyway, so I found this software that basically could synchronize multiple video sources via the audio waveform, because they're technically, if every camera is recording the same audio, it would break it into the audio waveform into mathematical points and then synchronize the videos within Final Cut or Avid. And that happened, it like blew my mind. I was like, wow, this really solved like an awesome problem. And it was like a plugin, right? And this was back, probably like 2012. And what I saw at that time was cell phone cameras were beginning to get good enough where people were actually recording concerts with their cell phone cameras. That was sort of the beginning of that kind of thing that people started doing. And I thought, whoa, like people are at concerts, they're all filming the same audio. Like, could this work to make this kind of shitty content less shitty, right? By maybe stitching it all together. And so that was the beginning of my first startup, which was Outlisten. And I think it was also right timing. It was at a time in the LA tech scene when there was this huge boom in new incubators, right? And what an incubator does in the tech space is they'll provide usually your first check. They'll take probably a large amount of equity for it. They'll give you office space and, mentorship and try and help you raise more money in the future. And so I met up with a couple engineering friends of mine. We started working on the weekends, and then we were able to raise some money and do that full time. And what Outlisten was kind of like I described. It just, you could upload your concert footage that you recorded from a concert. It would find any other angles from the same concert, stitch them together, and it was this always evolving video.
Okay.
Particular concert. So we actually built that tech, and that was really, really cool tech, but it had some issues of its own in that we'd work with, say, Demi Lovato, and then we'd go to Miley Cyrus and she'd say, well, I'm not going to do what Demi Lovato is doing because they're effectively competing. So it was this interesting thing where we discovered where, even though it was really cool tech, we'd work with one artist, but people saw it as sort of a marketing shtick. And then closed 3 or 5 other doors. And then I knew nothing about rights. I knew nothing about publishing rights. Now I'm an expert, but a self-proclaimed expert at least. And we found out we didn't own any of the content that was being created. In fact, like we could get sued. And so it was this big like lesson in just like, oh, it's not just about having a good idea. You need to think about the business and the gotchas and, and so that was kind of like my first taste. And that company ended up failing. And I think if that had not failed and I had not gone through that, I wouldn't have had the success later with Repost. But it was sort of the transition, I think, back to your initial question of sort of, kind of going from, one industry, traditional film and TV into sort of more digital content, music. It transitioned sort of from my love of video, from a problem I had in the video space. And I was able to incorporate that into music. And then, the rest was history.
Okay. No, that's an insightful answer. Thank you. Hmm. Okay, I'm gonna move into a little bit more about Mogul now. Could you tell us more about your new company? What is it about, and how do you see it shaping the future of artist rights and the transparency in revenue tracking?
Sure. So I'll tell it from a story standpoint as well. So I was at SoundCloud for a number of years and, working with tons of artists, helping them on a portion of their business. And what I learned while I was at SoundCloud was, I believe the number is between $500 million to $250 million every year doesn't make it to its intended recipient in the music industry. And I thought, wow, that is a lot of money. Like, why is that the case? And it was because artists weren't signed up for the right thing. Maybe the distributors or publishers or neighboring rights collection societies, the people who were the middlemen responsible for collecting on these royalties, were maybe not doing a great job. And then we also found this other issue is which there's just a lot to manage if you're an artist, right? There's so many different companies and things you need to log into to get paid what you're owed, that just keeping track of all these different sources and companies and things lead to a lot of inefficiency, which is why so much of that money doesn't make it to its intended recipients, right? Because they literally have the data on who to pay out. And so we kind of had that like assumption. And after I left SoundCloud, I actually took a year off completely. I just, I was like, I knew I'm going to start another music company, but I'm going to really take my time with it and, just take a little sabbatical. And so we started talking to artists and managers and lawyers, and they kind of agreed. There's a lot to manage, hard to keep track of. And no one really felt like they were getting paid 100% of what they were owed, and no one really trusted a lot of the entities that paid them to be doing a good job. I felt like they didn't have the tools, so we kind of were able to validate that hypothesis. And so we decided to try and build a solution, and it's been launched for, I think, I don't know if this is the exact right number, maybe 7 or 8 months, but the company itself, from a concept or from a product standpoint, is, if you've ever used Rocket Money or Mint.com, it's very, very similar. So instead of connecting your bank account and your credit card accounts into Rocket Money, you're connecting the companies that collect on your royalties into Mogul. So that would your Universal Music account, or your DistroKid account, or your Sony Music Publishing account, or your Songtrust account, or your ASCAP, or your BMI, or your YouTube channel. You connect to all the things that make up your business. We authenticate into those sources, pull in all of your earnings statements, your catalog, your earnings files, and centralize it. So you have all your sound recordings and all your publishing in one place, which I didn't think that would be a big deal, but a lot of artists just have never had that organization.
100%, yeah.
Right. And then, which we thought, like, we didn't realize that would be valuable in of itself. And then beyond that is, once we have all that data, we can start to basically like cross the data between different sources and figure out where you're missing out on your royalties. So a great example is, let's say you distribute through DistroKid, right? But we're not seeing the public performance publisher share of performance coming in from ASCAP, right? There should be an associated revenue on that like rights type as well for that thing put into Spotify through DistroKid. So if that happens, we'll flag it. We'll say, hey, doesn't look like this is registered, or looks like this was registered, but the money didn't come in, right? The other thing we do is we actually have downloaded more or less all of these residual databases across the internet. SAG-AFTRA, the Film Music Fund, the Mechanical Licensing Collective, right? All these places where money could get held up or stuck, more or less. We search all of those and we display those issues to you as well within Mogul. So kind of to wrap a bow on it, what we're trying to do is create a place that effectively helps any artist easily understand the health of their business. And if there are issues, we want to provide actionable steps to getting paid what you're owed so that you get every penny that you're entitled to.
Okay. To touch on that a little bit, could you quickly talk about that black box of, royalties that doesn't, when it ends up not being collected, where does that money go?
So this is you're getting into my sort of like tin hat philosophy. I'm happy to say it. So it kind of depends, right? You could have black box at, say, Sound Exchange, right? There could be money for you there, or you could have, black box royalties held up for you at the MLC or at YouTube, right? And all of these different entities have different processes and, paths. But what generally happens is once about 3 to 5 years go by, usually the royalties go into what's called like a lost property type state, where it's like, okay, we've held on to this money for long enough. We don't know who to pay it out to. And what most people do is they just say, we're just going to give it to the major labels and the major publishers because they kind of control most of the industry anyway. Okay. And now I'm getting into my tin hat theory phase. So now look at all the people on the boards of all of these companies that this happens, right? Are there the people who benefit, right, from hundreds of millions of dollars a year not getting paid out to the independent sector of music?
Yeah.
I think you could do that research yourself. But yeah, it's a problem, unfortunately, that I think even though these entities' jobs are to pay out these royalties, there are certain pockets of the industry that benefit from it being kind of closed off and hard to access. And that's very, very what we're trying to fight against. Is how do you whittle that down?
Yeah, 100%. I'm actually going to ask some more questions that are somewhat related to that, but we'll put a pause on that for now. Another question that I had for you was that, could you talk about the financing opportunities you have for artists with regards to advances in catalog sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a number of partnerships as well as some stuff that we're doing in-house. So I think that if you take a very like macro look at what's happening in the industry, I think it's with sort of the advent of the hypnosises of the world, it's become very, very popular to buy catalog. It's become like kind of a sincere thing. If you go back 10 or 20 years, it was sort of just like you got a label advance, right? But now you have all these pockets of people now who are willing to buy and acquire catalog. And, and what my theory is on that is that's great, right? That's awesome that there's more paths for capital for artists to, get a down payment on a home or, do whatever it is they need to do. But there's not a lot of people out there like actively representing the artists themselves. And so what you end up having are brokers, right? Who for the larger deals will represent the artist. They'll maybe take a percentage, a little bit of the transaction, but they'll go out and they'll get you the best deal that's possible. And I think what you're seeing happening right now in music is, an artist will get one deal and will just go with it, right? And so the opportunity we see is how can we position Mogul to provide as many paths and as many options to artists to get as many bids as possible in a way that's going to be the most advantageous for them. And so we've done some partnerships with a number of companies that you can actually see on our partners page or within our app and the website itself. How the process works is when you connect all of your sources, your distributors, your publishers, your performing rights organization, the platforms you work with, we actually do our own valuation. And what we do, how that works is we actually calculate how old your catalog is, how consistent it is, and we apply multiples to the catalog. There are different sound recording and publishing multiples. And we basically spin out a number. We say, we think you could sell everything for $100,000, right? Say, just example, $1 million, right? And then we say, great, here's a couple paths for you to go check those out. In those scenarios, in those sort of referral type partnerships, we get a small percent off of the person who we've referred it to for facilitating that introduction. We don't do advances ourselves. Yeah, what we're trying to do is connect the dots. And I think when I think of the future of this offering, it's how do we create enough partnerships with enough people and, provide artists with the like optionality of knowing who's out there and who they should talk to get the best deal. We want to be more on the artist side, if that makes sense.
No, that sounds like a great idea for sure. I think the one additional thing that I was hoping you could add on or touch on, because like there's the catalog sales where someone is potentially buying, all the rights to the catalog in one scenario. Then there's the alternative option in the advance in that
right,
you still retain ownership of the rights that you have, but you're given a specific amount of money and they potentially make residuals from that. Could you just touch on that side a little bit more as well too? Because not all artists are comfortable with catalog sales. But yeah.
Totally. So you're totally right. And thank you for calling that out. It's very different between a catalog sale and an advance. And you can there's different types of catalog sales and different types of advance. So you can get complicated. But yeah, right. A catalog sale is you're probably going to make a little bit more money, but you will forego ever probably earning royalties on, the content that you created, ever again, right? Because you're selling the actual ownership. Now, sometimes there are like reversions, right? Where someone owns it for 10 years and it reverts back or something like that. Sometimes you do sequels like that. And then there's the advance, right? Which, you might get a little bit less money than you would on a catalog sale, but it's, you effectively, someone's acting like a bank. So if someone advances you $50,000, the royalties that are accumulated go towards that $50,000 balance. And then once you've recouped that balance, you can take it somewhere else, get another advance. You can just say, I want to start earning again from those royalty streams. You can do that too. The thing that a lot of artists don't understand with regards to how advances work, and there's actually a great tool, I might botch the name. I think if you just Google record label calculator or advanced calculator.
I know what you're referring to. I just can't remember the name.
A great tool for this. But like, let's say you do a 50-50 deal, right? The thing that a lot of people don't understand, what that means from a blanket standpoint is, let's say you do $100,000 advance and it's a 50-50 deal. What that usually means is only 50% of the earnings that come in each month are going to go towards taking down that $100,000 balance. The other 50% is just going to go in the advancer's pocket, right? And so what ends up happening is by the end of the term, only 50% of what actually was earned went towards recouping the advance, while the other 50% went in the investor's pocket, which is a pretty good deal. So I can't tell you how many advances we did at SoundCloud and, just artists I've helped in general outside of even Mogul or SoundCloud or anywhere else where, that concept is not like super obvious to them. So it's really, really important to try and get like a good split to make sure that you recoup that advance as quickly as possible.
No, great answer. Yeah. Thank you for answering that. Moving on to my next question, to stay on the topic of financing. When you started Repost Network and Mogul, how did you approach fundraising? Were there periods where you had to bootstrap and fund the business yourself? Also, how did you approach getting investors?
Yeah. So the answer is, with Repost, I was very bad at fundraising. Mogul, I have been much better. So, and it's a skill. It's a learning process. And a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, even me, I was a second-time entrepreneur. I had a lot of trouble with it with Repost. So, what ended up happening, our story is I saw SoundCloud rolled out monetization in 2015. I saw how difficult it was for artists to access. And so I built sort of the MVP of Repost was we built a really, really easy way for artists to just connect their SoundCloud channels. It would pull in their tracks. We'd ask for a little bit of information, and then we'd effectively clear the rights so you could monetize, and you could start monetizing quickly from ads and eventually subscription revenue. Now, I did that on my own, right? A lot of people think, okay, I need to come up with a pitch deck. I'm pre-product and I'm going to raise. I don't recommend ever doing that, right? What we did was we did that and it exploded. It was one of those things where we launched it and we were solving a real problem. Artists wanted to know how to monetize. There weren't a lot of people who were helping them at the time. And we started just getting all these signups, right? And it got to a point where I didn't have enough hours in the day, because we obviously had a front end to artists that looked automated, but in the background, I was doing a lot of like manual registration and like ops work, right? And it got to this point where it was me and my technical co-founder, Joey. I didn't have enough hours in the day to like deal with the customer support, onboard new clients, do the monetization, do all the other things that you have to do when you run a company. And so I was like ripping my hair out. And so I went to an investor called Amplify LA, which is based in Venice Beach. And, through a connection I had from my previous startup. And I was like, and it was like the funniest pitch, right? Because everyone thinks the pitch is like, you've got the pitch deck and, you have your problem statement and your market and your solution statement. But I was just like this stressed out guy. And I was like, if I don't raise like $100,000 or a couple $100,000, like, I don't know if like, I might eventually have to shut this down because like, and that was like the reality of the situation. I was getting buried by like the demand of it all. And so, and I kid you not, this investor, he looks at me and goes, Jeff, what you just said is better than 95% of the companies that we talk to. Right? You actually have demand. You actually have a business here. And if we invest $100,000, $200,000 in this, we know exactly what it's going to go towards. It's going to go towards you scaling something that's already proven. And so they were sort of the first people we reached out to when we got that check. And that was really transformational for us. So sort of advice point one is take it as far as you humanly can yourself and try and create demand for the product before you raise money. Otherwise, if you are successful, you're going to get like a really bad deal.
Yeah.
So, and then we went on with Repost. We went on our merry way. We, were able to hire a couple people. I wasn't ripping my hair out anymore. We were scaling up nicely. And there were these platforms like STEM, United Masters, and they were raising like crazy amounts of money. They were raising like tens. I think United Masters was raised over $100 million. And we were kind of like all starting around the same time. And so I thought, wow, like all my competitors are raising money. I'm going to try and raise more money. The issue we ran into there was, I think, just me being a little like rough around the edges at the time. But the issue we ran into was actually our revenue. So we were like this business that was like, doing 50, 100K a month, whatever it was. And they were sort of like, oh, your growth curve is kind of like slow and steady. We want something that's going to be like really sharp. I was like, I have a real business. Like, it's been a year. We're profitable now. And they're like, we don't want to invest in a profit. And I was like, that's crazy.
It is
And so
crazy. It's so crazy. Sorry.
Yeah. And that's not the way it works now. Actually, like the market is very, very different now. Because I think the industry learned that there's a lot of these companies that raised just a ton of money and just were vaporware, nowhere. And so with Repost, we only raised $500,000. It was from like two Amplify LA, a fund out of France called Klima, and then some angel investors. And then we just kind of got to a point where we said, you know what, like, I don't want to waste my time fundraising. I'm just going to build a profitable business. And then got to a certain level where then we had enough history. We actually did an SBA loan, which is like no different than the way a liquor store gets a loan from the bank. It was the exact same type of loan. And for us, we were able to manage our debt, right? Because we knew what our costs were, and we were able to do that in a way that was like non-dilutive. And so when we ended up selling to SoundCloud, Joey and I, we owned like 80 something% of the business, right? And that ended up being a really great situation for us because we had some investors who we had to get on board with it, but it was we didn't have a cap table with like 100 people, like some of the other companies mentioned, right? And so, and not to say that they went down the wrong path, but I think ultimately when I look back at it, I was successful at getting the initial check for Repost, unsuccessful at doing like the wider growth round. But in retrospect, I'm very glad that happened. With Mogul, and I'll stop talking in just a bit. I know I'm talking a lot.
No, it's great. Keep going.
Yeah, we did a $2 million round, right? And that was a very different decision, right? Our product, we have to basically support, hundreds of different companies around the industry and build connections into them. And it's a very difficult technical problem to solve. It's very engineering heavy. I'm like the only person on the company who isn't an engineer. And so we just saw that if we were going to really tie and string together all the different facets of the music industry, we had to raise money. Otherwise, it would have been, it was just sort of something that needed to happen. And so, and I will say this, it's like, once you do have an exit, like I do to like a name brand company, it does become easier, right? People do care. I mean, people care about like what the business is and the opportunity, and, investors of course do their diligence, but I'd say, once you've kind of gone into that second round founder sphere with like an exit, that it does get easier for sure. But it still doesn't mean you shouldn't ask yourself, is raising money the right thing to do for this business? So, yeah.
And I just wanted a quick note. When you said SB loan, I'm assuming you're referring to small business loan.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Perfect. Just from a little anecdotal experience, because I was one of those early artists that joined Repost quite early. And I remember that feeling of pulling my hair out, trying to monetize like music on SoundCloud. And effectively, there were only, at least from what I saw, I could only come across you and one other company that they didn't really have the best way of going about it, but like it was just two of you guys. I remember that feeling of monetizing my music through Repost Network for SoundCloud. And I was just like, okay, I have this headache figured out and done with. I can move on to other things that I want to do and figure out business wise. So I can see why from that end, why it really had a lot of demand, because it solved a lot of problems for a lot of people trying to get into that monetization of SoundCloud. Then obviously you guys built it out to even be more than just SoundCloud over time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm a big fan of that. Like if anyone's listening and trying to think about starting a company in music, a really great place is solve a really niche problem. And I think we always knew we were going to do distribution and all of that. But, if you can find an opportunity and there's like something really, really difficult that like maybe a bunch of other companies should be doing, but they're not for whatever reason. In this case, like other distributors should have been doing SoundCloud monetization, but
Honestly,
they weren't for it, right? It's like if you can kind of look at the market and start with something really small and like nail that, it always makes it easier to sell other services and other things to people once you have them within your product and they trust you and they're using you, right? And so for us, we always knew it wasn't going to be just SoundCloud because we never want to be, for us, we didn't want to be in business built on the back of just one company. That's like too risky.
100%.
That we were like, we can solve a great problem. We can build an audience and a user base, around us. And we can we could probably build a much bigger business in the long term, but it was, start small, grow out.
Yeah. And just to add on to that again, if I remember correctly, there were some of the bigger distributors at the time who I think they did start out trying to monetize SoundCloud. Then they ditched it. I think because maybe the difficulty of managing or whatever reason it was. Because I remember going through, I was like, okay, I can try this. And I saw, oh no, they're not doing that anymore with SoundCloud. And it just left you with limited options. And again, good for you guys for taking on that challenge, because I'm sure that just diverted a lot of traffic towards reposting itself. But yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we had major label artists reaching out. They're like, can we work with you? And we'd have to be like, no, like, you're in a major, like you can't do that.
Yeah.
And they're like, they're not doing it right. And now it's better, right? Like once I was in SoundCloud, now it's running like really smoothly in the majors. But I think at the beginning, it's like anything. It's like rolling out monetization for like a massive DSP is no easy feat, right? And there's learning curves and there's going to be some bumps along the way. And we just got in there and, tried to help people the best way we.
Actually, that just reminded me in, earlier versions of Repost, some of the people that were shown as testimonials. I think you had Waka Flocka. How did you guys get Waka Flocka to distribute through Repost?
That's a good. Wow, great memory. You're like, it's awesome. How did Waka Flocka? I almost don't remember, to be completely honest. But I think it was a scenario where I think he was with Warner or Atlantic. Don't quote me on that, but he had some releases, I believe, which were not a part of his deal, which allowed, if I remember correctly, allowed him to be like sort of selective about what he could monetize or so. Warner should be. We came in there and like filled in the cracks. And I mean, Walk is great. Like that team, they're very forward thinking. He's like very active in social media and stuff like.
He's very smart with his business.
He is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We never really dealt with him directly, but like his team was like, it was very like no stone unturned, if I remember correctly. And I remember respecting that because not a lot of artist teams think that way.
No. Okay. Moving on to the next question. SoundCloud's multi-million acquisition of Repost Network is a big success story. How did that deal come about? And what were some of the critical factors that made the acquisition attractive for both sides?
Yeah, there's always the story of how it happened, and there's the story you have to tell. But I'm trying to do something a little in the middle. So, there were actually 2 attempts on acquiring Repost from SoundCloud. So there's this saying when you sell a business that every deal dies twice. I guess our deal died once, and so there was an attempt to buy Repost. It didn't work out. We kind of couldn't see eye to eye on valuation, which is typically why that happens. And then SoundCloud rolled out sort of a competitor, right? And throughout that process, to point around what made it competitive, right, is I went out to New York. I met with the team. This was when a new CEO and a new COO had come in after the original founders had left. And I came in and I was like, look, this is our LTV. This is how much, like, we take an artist from SoundCloud, we distribute them other places. And, we're a pretty big deal on your platform as an independent player. We're growing. What if we did this for all of SoundCloud, right? Like if Repost were to power distribution for all of SoundCloud, you might get more revenue per user than you are currently through your subscription offering, right? And that was like, and you could kind of, when I remember pitching that, you kind of like see
the gears turning. Yeah.
And so I was kind of selling them actually on like a business, like a partnership, right? It was not about selling. And then, it was like, okay, well, maybe we should just do it. that didn't work out. Then SoundCloud, I guess I did a good enough job selling it because then SoundCloud actually built it themselves. And so, and I feel like I could write a book on platform dependency at this point, but SoundCloud, we walked away from the deal. And then I found out SoundCloud was going to try and not clone us, but like come after us. And that's a really hard thing as a founder. That's like, you're like, oh my gosh, my sales funnel is about to like just do what I do. And I felt like an idiot. I'm like, I just told them how to do it. I did some diligence. And so I was like, oh my God, Jeff. Anyway, so, a little bit of time goes by and I get a phone call. We had like a partner person at SoundCloud who was responsible for the partnership. And she's like, yeah, so tomorrow there's going to be some press. I'm like, okay. And so I don't know if I can.
You can cuss all you want. Go for it, man.
And so anyway, it goes out and they launch their distribution product and it's kind of crickets. Like nothing really happened with it. And, I learned this after the fact once I got into SoundCloud was, unfortunately, it was an awesome team of people who worked on that. Like I actually ended up getting to know the people who built that and, great engineers, great product people, but I don't know that they had like the right DNA and not the right DNA that like different DNA than what we had. And it ended up not working out. And so how it came back around the second time was I think in the summer of 2018, it was, again, it's timing and luck, right? So timing is a huge part of it. But DistroKid, Spotify was part of a private equity deal that
I remember this.
Yeah. And then Apple Music acquired Platoon, which was another one of my competitors. And I think that all happened within a couple months of each other. And so when that happened, my phone just started ringing, right? From platforms, major labels, like tech companies that wanted to potentially talk M&A with Repos. Because I think we were like one of those companies at a certain range of volume that it started to become attractive. And so me and Joey, we kind of had to make a call, which was, okay, if they're calling me, they're definitely calling all of my competitors too, right? And so, you went back, kind of going back to that question about raising money, right? We said, okay, if we don't do something in the next 12 months, sell or raise more capital, all of our competitors are going to be a lot more capitalized than we are. And that was a tough decision. So we actually ran a process. Because I was so bad at raising money before, and it was so time consuming, let's just get a banker, right? And maybe we sell, maybe we raise money. Let's just see what the market wants to do with us. And so we actually just ran a process and we obviously included SoundCloud in that process, and SoundCloud came to the table. And I think enough time had passed so that their kind of off-platform distribution offering kind of wasn't working. They kind of knew that. And we ended up with 2 offers, but we ended up going with SoundCloud. And yeah, we just, never looked back. And second time was the charm.
Okay. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, thank you for going in depth on that. Let's go to the next question. Repos Network was a game changer for indie artists and monetizing their music, especially on SoundCloud. What inspired you to create it?
Yeah. I think part of me had a chip on my shoulder. So the music video, crowdsourced video concert concept. It was like a music tech product that I created and it had failed. And I'd gotten that taste of being an entrepreneur, being in the music tech space. And I think personally, that was really hard to shut down a company, but I was hungry to do it again and like put what I had learned to like new use on something new. I had definitely gotten the bug. So I think there was that personally. And then again, it was luck and timing. So I was at a company called Fullscreen, which at the time it was where I was working. I was on the music team there. It was basically working with large YouTube influencers and helping them with get better ads on their content and monetize more efficiently. And I was kind of on the music side of things there. And so I kind of had all these relationships with all these big YouTube influencers in the music space, ranging from promo channels to actual artists. And at the time, SoundCloud rolled out monetization for the first time ever. And I said, oh my gosh, like that's cool. Like I have all these relationships with all these artists. YouTube's really similar to SoundCloud, which I'd become an expert in. How does this work? And I just saw how poorly it was launched, to be completely honest. Like literally physical mail. At the time, physical mail had to be sent to monetize a song on SoundCloud. Which like imagine a letter to monetize your YouTube video. And I looked at that and I was like, wait a minute. Okay, this just launched. I know enough about product to get myself in trouble. I have all these relationships with all these big YouTube influencers in the music space. And I'm an expert at YouTube, which is another open UGC platform, just like SoundCloud. I've seen that arc with YouTube, and there's no one in the space solving this problem. And so it was kind of one of those moments where I think almost egotistically, I was like, I think I'm the first person in the world to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did it, and I quit my job. And it took me a while to get a deal with SoundCloud to let me, just some guy who they didn't know, to be able to monetize SoundCloud. But I hustled my way in and I got it. And yeah, part of it was just a willingness to just jump into the deep end and
just go
try and make something work. I don't know. I kind of was like, I think I'm a really good person to solve this problem. I think I was right. I think I was right, and I think it was the right time to bet on myself. So, yeah.
Good answer. Okay, let's put on our tinfoil hats again. What are your thoughts on Spotify's 1,000 stream payment threshold, especially when just opposed against something like fan-powered royalties, an initiative championed by SoundCloud?
Yeah. Gosh, it's funny. I haven't thought about the minimum 1,000 play threshold. I'm obviously a big fan of fan-powered royalties. I did not come up with it by any means, but I was at SoundCloud and very close with the people who did. And the people who are actually within Repost and now SoundCloud for Artists were some of the first to ever get access to fan-powered royalties. And I saw the success of that was for some people to really truly earn more. And so, I'm a fan of that model. I think getting the rest of the industry to acknowledge it and opt into it is going to be difficult, because ultimately, especially the majors, they make a lot of money from a pro rata model. And would it be safe to assume, David, that should I explain what fan-powered royalties?
I was actually going to ask you to, please. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So just, for audience purposes. So the way it works usually on Spotify, right, is you pay a subscription to Spotify, and who your subscription revenue goes to isn't really actually connected to who you listen to, right? What happens is your money goes into a pool, and then basically, if Drake is getting all the plays that month, he gets a percentage of that proportionate to what money has been put in the pool. Does that make sense? So hopefully that makes sense.
It makes sense.
Versus fan-powered royalties, it's like if I pay $10 to SoundCloud and I only listen to Drake once, the majority of my money is just going to go straight to Drake, right? So what it does is it actually ties the amount you're paying to the platform, whether it's watching an ad or paying a subscription, and associates it directly to who you're listening to, versus the way it doesn't work. Now, if you're a major label or major publisher, right, that's really good for you, because it's actually based on your actual market share of the industry versus are a bunch of people listening to your content. So it's one of those things I think is great for the independent sector, and it's great for musicians who have diehard fans, which I think is probably where that should. I think that's where that should go. Not great for artists who just have a bunch of passive kind of casual listeners, right? The 1,000 play threshold on Spotify, I understand the theory of, well, if you're getting less than 1,000 plays, it's not that much money. Who cares, right? Let it go to everyone else. But I actually don't understand how that isn't straight up theft. Even if it's the reality is all those pennies in the aggregate, it becomes over several years hundreds of millions of dollars.
100%.
Right. And I actually fail to understand how Spotify can just do that, and how that's okay or even legal. And I might have, I've been away from kind of the inside of the DSP world, but yeah, I'm open to other opinion if anyone reach out and has conflicting thoughts. But to me, it just seems, even if it's 10 cents, it's not your 10 cents to take away and give away to someone else.
100%.
So, and then all the artists who also are saying, the artists who get over 1,000 plays, they benefit from it, because of the pro rata model. But the artists who are kind of saying, I know, just what happens to the artist who's just starting out, and it might be just a few bucks or something, but maybe that makes them excited to keep going, and now they just don't have that. I don't know. It just seems, I don't know, it just feels icky and kind of wrong.
It is.
Just I feel personally, yeah.
I guess my own 2 cents on it as well too is that it, as you said, it goes into the millions when you add up everything, and that's money that's allocated towards the independent music sector as a whole. In that section, that's money that's being drawn out from that economy. And I think there's the tagline of 1,000 streams, but it's more than that. It's 1,000 streams that has to be maintained yearly in perpetuity.
Yes.
So you have to meet that quota every year. And I think there's even an additional element of a specific amount of listeners as well, too, that's required too. I'm not 100% sure on that section. But again, it creates an additional barrier to entry for people. Let's say an artist decided to work really hard and they knew they couldn't get like the massive amount of attention that major artists would get. But they're like, I'm going to release 200, 300 tracks. And like, I'm going to work on building a catalog, and a catalog would be my focus. And I have this large catalog, and it may not be getting, millions of play, but at least I'm getting like 1,000 or 2,000 per year, whatever from it. The fact that that barrier is now added, that time and effort that an artist has put into building that for themselves, it's literally being stripped away. And I've had conversations with artists in different levels who actually went through that. So it affects, there's a lot of artists that it does actually have a deep impact on. Then when you look at it from a macro scale, how all of that money is being taken away from the independent economy and transferred into the label's hands as well too, because there's a larger benefit to that 1,000 being going there. It's an unfortunate thing that I think that has happened. And the most difficult thing around it is trying to get people to understand why that impacts so many people on such a huge level, because people are just going to write it off. Oh, it's just 1,000 streams, but it's more than that. But sometimes that's kind of like the hard part of being in music, like trying to get everyone to really look at things critically and analytically, like what's really happening. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. That's my tinfoil hat for that.
I agree. I agree with you. I think the other part of it too is how, continuing to keep the tinfoil hat on, I think there's 2 points. I think it shows off the still mafiosa nature of the music industry, right? I think it's pretty clear that the major labels benefit the most from this, and they push Spotify into this. As someone who's an equity holder in Spotify and, have just a ton of leverage over the platform. So I think there's that, which, and I don't know the answer to this, which is like, how much of this was like Spotify's idea versus you?
Yeah.
So I think there's that. And then I think the second part is, it was just kind of weird how that whole press release was kind of behind the veil of trying to combat fraud.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I understand that fraud's an issue. Fraud is a really, really big issue that should be solved. I don't know that this solves the fraud issue. I don't think it's like actually a one-to-one thing that by doing this, there's going to be less fraud. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see how that's the case.
Fair. No, I feel
because when someone bots a song on Spotify, I mean, maybe there's a lot of places that, there's this guy who just got arrested for stealing $10 million, and he created like a ton of songs. Yeah. It was sort of like a penny, get a lot of little pennies here and there. But I think when most artists are trying to bot something, it's like they're usually going to some shady marketing service on the internet, and it gets them to 20 or 30 or 40,000 plays, right? Because usually people are doing it for optics standpoints. And yes, there are the bad players who are trying to like really drain money. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but it was just like interesting that was how it was like put behind the veil of that. Yeah. But that almost feels like putting a round peg into a square hole for me.
Yeah. No, it's the presentation of it, like, and it's kind of like, because like, if you really kind of understand what's happening, you can see what's happening beyond what's presented. And it's a little insulting because it kind of speaks to it's insulting to people's intelligence of like, yeah, this is what we're saying it is, but we know what's going on, at least to a deeper level in that aspect and where it benefits society. But it's like, but again, like me watching as an artist and watching like the artist conversation and dialogue around it, it's still a pretty split conversation. And it just shows like, I guess that's why they can get away with stuff like that, because if we can, as a collective, see where this is an issue and people are still going to even support it, it shows like it's one of the hardest things to really deal with in music, is really seeing the bigger picture. not just what's in front
Yeah.
of you.
I mean, the thing I always say is, it's like and I know it's not a one-to-one comparison, but there was this huge SAG strike that happened because the Netflixes, the Hulus, and all platforms were going to change the rates, and it meant that like less money was going to get paid out to like writers and the people who worked on these TV and film shows. And I know it's not the same thing, but it's like I just wish the music industry
Not like that.
kind of I mean, I guess every musician can't just like go on strike, right?
Yeah.
But, like, or maybe they, I don't know, but there's no like kind of like unionization, like championing it all, in the way that like the film and television space has.
100%. I felt the exact same way during the SAG-AFTRA strikes as well too. It was just like envy. I was like, damn, I wish that was us kind of thing. But
yeah, I'd be out there.
Yeah. Okay, let's take off the tinfoil hats and go into some other questions. Let's see. Having worked with thousands of artists, what's the most significant challenge you've seen them face in today's music landscape, and how do you think they can overcome it?
I still think it's financial literacy and empowerment as it relates to the music industry. I think, again, it goes back to the problem that I'm trying to solve at Mogul, which is all this money is not making it to the people it's owed to because, like I said, they're not signed up for the right thing and they don't know, what sides of the music they should be getting paid for versus what they shouldn't. They're registering stuff they shouldn't be registering, right? There's just nothing out there making it easy for people to understand if they're doing it right or not. And the joke I always say is you practically need a law degree to understand everything you're in the music industry. And like and that sucks. It sucks that it's like so difficult and convoluted and difficult for people to navigate. And so I think at the heart of it, education is a really, really big problem. And I think just connectivity between the music industry and data and making it so things can talk to each other a little bit better so that people can actually, get what they're entitled to, I see as a huge problem. Now, I'm in that problem all day, every day. So it's hard for me to kind of take the horse blinders off for that question. But yeah, I think I would say like financial literacy as it relates to the music industry.
No, that's a good answer.
What do you think?
I think in addition to financial literacy and the lack of education that people may have in music education, I think the one on top of that is business literacy too as well. Like really understanding the fundamentals of business and how it transfers between different kinds of businesses. Because at the end of the day, a musician is still a small business and the fundamentals that apply are largely transferable between industries. And having the capacity to really sit down and understand what happens aside from just the creative aspect of you making your product, you still have to understand the packaging, which is your brand. You have to understand the marketing. You have to understand the sales, the conversion of all the eyes that you get. How can you funnel that into like some form of sales? Like what is the average sale of like the different products that you have? Things like that. So like, which is, is present in all kinds of business, and trying to really get an artist to understand that is because again, I can empathize. I understand it as well too, because I'm an artist. Like you just want to focus on the creativity. That's the fun part. That's why we got into it. But if we really do want to make this a profession, we do have to sit down and accept that there are other things that come with all professions, because it happens in everything. Like every single profession has their fun side in terms of like the things that they want to do, but they're the things that they would rather not like to do. But you just have to kind of like put that aside. And what is the responsibility that I need to have to do this as my profession? So it's a process. It's a conversation, and to give artists also fairness. Like a lot of artists do listen and do try their best to try and understand the business as well, to which we do have to really respect. It's just that in all fairness, it is also tough to do it in music as well too. There's so much everywhere kind of thing. It's not as structured as other industries. Like it's kind of like a wild, wild west of businesses. So like, I think that's also an aspect of it too. So
yeah, it's just overwhelming.
It is.
Even for people who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We talk to people in royalty departments at big business management firms, right? And it's just, there's like just so much to keep track of.
So much.
So much. Yeah. The music industry is very, very complex. And I think I like definitely +1 to giving artists the respect and acknowledgement that they deserve around, yeah, a lot of them do try to understand it and learn and navigate it. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Completely agree. I think it's just naturally difficult and sort of like stacked against people.
Yeah.
Which is, the big problem that we're trying to solve at mobile.
Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that if it was a personal wish on my end, would be to have artists look at not the flashy, it's kind of similar to the example of how people were focusing on how much this comes, how fast they're growing or whatever, rather than focusing on what you guys had, which is stability, profitability, like structure. An artist doesn't need to have the world to be able to create a business that's sustainable for themselves. And if that was anything that I wish was more prevalent in the culture of music, is just to understand that if you can figure out what it is that you offer, figure out the target demographic and audience that you want, figure out the price of the products that you're going to sell, then you can start to look at the numbers of what is reasonable to target in terms of converting people to sales. Like you've probably heard of like the 1,000 true fans rules or like the 1,000 fan rule. It's a cliche, but it is pretty much like a good basis of business and understanding that if you can get, you don't even need 1,000, like 500 customers, and you have a product that people like and consistently come towards, like that's your business model set in stone. And that's really what a lot of it comes down to. So that would be my one thing that I wish was more apparent. You don't need millions of people. You can create a business that's sustainable if you focus on your fundamentals and just, working from there.
But totally. Like I love the like lo-fi chill hip hop space actually. It's sort of it's just this niche.
Yeah.
And, we would work with these young, 20 something kids who were making lo-fi beats and they're pulling in 10 grand a month, and that's a living. That's awesome. And it doesn't mean they're going to be like the next big, thing, but that's amazing. And that's something, and that's a real business. And so there's kind of like how when we started Repost, we started with a niche, right? It's like you could kind of do the same thing with your music.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like there's so many spaces that you can also tackle within music to monetize yourself, which is also like, I guess one of the benefits of music is that you can kind of figure out what are you as an individual? How do you really thrive? You may not like to perform, but you can be more creative in like making music rather than performing. I, as an individual, I was like, when I started out, I was like, I don't really want to perform music. I don't want to be going out there. And that put me into looking into things like licensing, making beats, productions, and stuff like that. That is one of the benefits of music, that you can try and figure out how to position yourself for something that makes sense for you. It's not there's only one option. There's multiple options in how you can monetize yourself. So that's that. We're winding down, just a few more questions left. Looking back at your career, what do you believe has been the most pivotal moment for you in helping shape the artist first ecosystem you're advocating for?
It's a good one. I think selling to SoundCloud, and I'm a little bittersweet, right? I think it's like typical founder. You sell the thing you love to a bigger company, and it things change, right? And that's I think when we sold to SoundCloud, it gave us the opportunity to provide our services to so many more people. And when we turned Repost into SoundCloud for artists and integrated that, just the sheer scale of how many people were using our tools and our tech and our platform was really, really rewarding. And I know, it's not without its problems right now, but, and unfortunately I can't affect it anymore, which is hard. But I think that was a really, really pivotal moment. I think that's kind of on the macro. And then there's one moment that I think really changed the direction of my life, which also happened at Repost, which was I had this artist, and I tell this story a lot. I had an artist who I think was working at Starbucks, and they told me that we met up in person, and they said that they had just quit their job at Starbucks and were taking music full time because of the Repost tech. And that happened. I was like, probably doing it because like I wanted to prove to myself I could make it in the music industry. It's probably being like a little not selfish. Like I cared about helping other people, but but as soon as like I heard that, everything just changed. It was like nothing, nothing mattered, even the business mechanics. It was just, okay, how do I do this for as many people as I humanly can? And I trust if I just follow that purpose of just helping as many creative people quit their day jobs and take their full time, I'm going to be okay. And more people, even more importantly, more people are going to be okay because of it. And so I think when that happened, it was like I kind of found a purpose, if that makes sense. And I think that really kicked me into gear to be like, I'm going to take this to the moon. I'm going to help as many people as I can. And I don't think if that had happened, I wouldn't have taken Repost to where it was, sold it to SoundCloud, right? I think that was like, when I think of the moment, I think that was the moment.
Okay. I'm one of those people that you positively affected through that as well too. So just letting you know that as well. So
thank you, man. That means a lot. That's awesome.
So thank you to you and to SoundCloud as well.
Great.
Okay. Where do you see the future of music distribution and royalties management heading in the next 5 to 10 years? And what role do you hope to play in shaping it?
Yeah, distribution has really changed a lot. When I started Repost in 2015, I think there was like 200 companies that were doing like record labels and distributors like in the market. Now there's something like over 3,000. So in the course of like 10 years. So I think if you look at like royalties and specifically distribution, I think that unfortunately is getting into a race to the bottom a little bit. It's starting to get a bit commoditized, and you need to start to think about like, what can you be doing differently? There's actually a really interesting distributor called Unchained, which their whole model is it's 100% free distribution, but they put the money that they collect from DSPs into like a account with a high interest rate, and they get their fee off of the interest rate off of the banks. And it's like, you're starting to see like really interesting things like that.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it's a cool model. I really like it. But yeah, so I think distribution will continue to sort of be commoditized. I think companies that are trying to acquire musicians as customers realize every artist needs distribution. And but I also think the 500-pound gorillas that, the DistroKids of the world, stuff like that will stay in that position too. Yeah. So I don't like it because I don't think that I think there's more competition in the space. I think pricing will get more challenging in the space, but I think what's cool about it is people will probably start to get really creative around it. And I think that's going to be exciting. I think I'm very passionate about other rights types right now because I think most artists have their distribution figured out. You have a ton of options, but what about the publishing? What about the neighboring rights? What about, all these other rights? And I think that the next sort of phase is going to be upping the way in which sort of the ancillary or other rights are collected, and what transparency will be, what will the product offerings around that look like. And so I think specifically around things like publishing administration and neighboring rights, I think you're going to see, I think that's the next race, the next 5 to 10 years. I think you're going to see a lot of people trying to differentiate themselves by offering collections on the rights types that are more difficult to do than distribution right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the last question, and it's a big one, Jeff.
Okay.
Back in 2015, you released an unfinished track called Strawberry Flamenco, along with 2 other releases in following years. Personally, it made me wonder, is there a huge catalog of unreleased music the world never got to hear from you? No. And when should we be expecting them to drop, Jeffrey?
No. No, there's no, that's a great last question. There's no catalog, probably beyond those 2 things. I think honestly, sometimes you need tracks to test stuff out with, right? Like I'll try registering this or distributing this, so we made a couple songs at Repost just on weekends where we were having fun,
fair,
jump into Logic or Ableton or whatever. And so, yeah, no, that's mostly what those were. My music, when I made music, it was usually in like a band format. I used to play drums and bass.
Okay.
In like rock and psychedelic type bands. But that has long passed. So, yeah, no,
that chapter closed. Okay. No, this is really great. Thank you again for making time for this conversation. I had a lot of fun. I loved hearing your insights. Before we wrap up, Can you share where listeners can find more about Mogul and any other links to your business or social media they should follow?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for asking. So you can check out Mogul at usemogul.com, usemogul.com. It's free to use. It's a freemium subscription. So you can log in, connect your accounts, start to understand how your business is ticking. And I'd highly recommend you do that. And yeah, Twitter, Instagram, or X, Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, all the other channels is just /usemogul. And yeah, you can find me if you want to get in touch. I'm just Jeff, Jeff at usemogul.com. So fairly straightforward.
Okay. Is that your email? Jeff at usemogul?
Yeah, it's my email. Yeah, reach out if you want to talk.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Jeff. Yeah, this was really great. I had a great time.
Yeah, had a lot of fun too. Let's put on the tin hats another time.
All right. I will let you go then, okay?
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Take care.
Okay.
All right. Bye.